I think they're both very interesting because they're both cities that are in which you're trying to stimulate growth, significant growth. I mean, in Oman, from 1.5 to, was it 3 million people. And this is part, as I understand it, of a policy by the Oman government to increase non-oil-based revenues by 40%. So that's a very significant economic growth. I don't know what proportion it is at the moment, whether it's already 35% or whatever. But you know, so there's growth there. And of course, what you're talking about in Huili is you know, very significant growth because you're almost next door, 150 kilometers away, okay, but almost next door to Shenzhen, which 40 years ago barely existed and is now, what, 15, 20 million people? Yeah, you know, and as you said, it's one of the richest parts of Asia, and where you're talking about is still relatively poor. It hasn't had that economic boost. So I think that's an interesting thing. And I suppose the question to start with is how much was there on the site? I mean, Oman, I guess, is quite an old city in its historic cores. But what sort of age are they, and how big are they as a proportion of the whole city?
Yeah. So, as you have seen, said it already. So, Muscat is already one of the oldest city, not only in Oman, it's on the GCC. I think it has a good trading route. So, actually, it started as a port city. So we have our economy was already built into international trade even before we have discovered oil. But you know, with the oil discovery, it was a bigger boost for our infrastructure, for our even admin work. So whatever is, let's say, from the last 50 years, we have focused on the infrastructure that the city has. So I think we have one of the best roads, best electricity grids, best water grids, potable water. So those were the bases where we are putting the extra added value projects on top of them. So if we are talking about the current value of economy, it is like as per the project, it is like 13.2 billion Omani Riyal. And this is the current situation of Muscat. But if we are doing all this extra 400 projects within this 15 years, so the GDP will jump to 44.2 billion Omani Riyal. So this is like the 3 times the current situation right now. But however, we cannot do that if we don't have this current base, which is the let's say, a good infrastructure, a good also skilled people, both in, like, let's say, the admin world for the locals, and also now how we are trying to attract the expats, like we have done with Monica, with us now. So,
well, I mean, that's interesting because, Daniel, you said that, you know, one of the things that you do in Moro is to look at the model of Singapore, which obviously has been very successful, both in, you know, managing urban growth, but also upping the skills and the economic productivity and prosperity of its people. And if that is, I guess, what you're trying to apply in this part of China.
Yeah, you know, in China, actually, it's not too hard to apply it because China's urban development and the capacity and the governance structures around development actually have improved a lot, right, compared to other parts of the world. In fact, a lot of the urban development, the early years of their urban development, they learned it from Singapore. So from a policy perspective, from an implementation perspective, it's not too far off. I think what we are able to do in China actually doesn't work in a lot of other parts of the world, where the capacity is much lower, where the policy regime or the policy ecosystem is not as strong, where the access to, you know, real live data of the current situation on the ground is not there. So in China, we're able to kind of bring our model, but you know, when we go overseas, we never like to say that you should be like Singapore, right? So the morals like intelligent planning model has been tested. You know, we've used it in projects in the Middle East, we've used it in projects in varying capacities in Fiji, in all over ASEAN and in China. So where we are now with that model, yes, the baseline was how Singapore kind of developed at that point. But you know, if you go to China now, even in Zhejiang, which is like we said, relatively poor, it is a city of 5.2 million people already. So the amount of work that we have to do, they're not at the early development stage, like if we were doing it in Africa. So there has to be a lot of tweaks to understand what the baseline level of development is, the nuances of what, the context and the nuances of the cultural regime there is very different than Singapore. But a lot of good lessons can still be applied.
And does it have natural resources nearby in the way Oman has oil? Zhejiang doesn't have natural resources like oil, but there's a lot of good natural geography that can be leveraged on, right? So traditionally, that part of Zhejiang, the main hub, the main city, was a little bit inland, and now a big part of the project was to find a way to have a development pathway southwards towards the coast, where there's a big natural deep port in a bay. Okay.
So that's something that we're going to be leveraging on for development.
But that's then perhaps something like Singapore, in that Singapore doesn't have natural resource, but it has a wonderful geography for trade. And I guess that's true of Muscat as well. You were alluding to the trading routes, historic trading routes across the Indian Ocean to East Africa to rest of Asia. And I guess that's a very important part of what will feed the growth and also the population growth.
I think one of the really interesting things about coming from the city which was so trade oriented, it shapes the people. Yeah. If you go to Oman comparing to other parts of Middle East, the people are really open. There is it's very easy to mingle with locals. I work mainly with Omanis. There's only, I think, other 5 expats in my building. But that gives you different community, and that also shapes the city. Yeah. It's the way how the people engage with other. It's not so compoundy, Sure. But it's got its challenges for sure. We're on our way.
But as I understand it, Oman has reasonable rainfall because of being on the coast compared to, say, the rest of the Arabian Peninsula.
Yeah, but that's still not much. But it has a flash flooding because it's sandwiched between very significant mountains, Hajar mountains. Yeah. So when it rains in mountains, you could be sunbathing in one of the wadis, and within 15 minutes, it's a massive flash flood coming your way.
Hence
so
the
early
water
warning systems.
Yeah.
That's where the smart city really comes into play to really protect its citizens from the natural aspects of the city.
Sure. Okay, well, look, I'm afraid we've come up against time, but thank you very much for telling us about your particular approach to smart cities, and 2, I think, quite interesting cities for that. We'll reconvene here at 12:10 for the Water Prize discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.